So we will ask Dr. Sarkar to speak for approximately half an hour as we normally do. And then afterwards, we will have some time for questions. If you have questions, could you please raise your hand? I think that's the easiest way for us to deal with it. And we'll bring people in the order that they ask questions. So having said all that, I think it's now down to me to introduce Dr. Sarkar. And some of you will already know him. I only know him through one of his papers, actually, which was about women with disabilities accessing higher education, which I remember reading a while back. So Dr. Ratan Sarkar is Associate Professor at the Department of Teacher Training at Prabhat Kumar College in West Bengal, which is associated with Vidyasagar University. He's written several publications, some on his own and some jointly with colleagues from that university and others. And he's also led a number of research projects, including nationally funded research projects in the Ministry of Education. I know he has many interesting things to tell us, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say today. So I'm going to hand over to him and say thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar, for joining us today.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, is it visible? Rajeshda, please confirm.
It's just coming. Yes, it's visible now.
Yes.
So is the slide getting changed?
Not yet. Can you move down? Can you move down to the next slide?
Yeah, yeah. I moved to the next slide. Is it getting changed there?
Slideshow. No. Are you in slideshow?
Yeah, yeah. So so I think there is some problem at my end. So can I go in that way?
Yes, that's fine. We can all see that. That's fine.
Okay. So good evening to one and all present here, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share, some of my thoughts and some of my learnings that again by conducting a study entitled "A Study on Knowledge and Attitude of Teachers Towards Inclusion of Children with Special Needs in Mainstream Schools." So before I begin, I would just like to read out a wonderful quote mentioned by Dash in a verdict. This goes like the PWDs, or the disabled, to are equal citizens of the country and have as much as a share in its resources as any other citizen. And the denial of their rights would not only be unjust or unfair to them and their families, but would create a larger and graver problem for the society at large. And what the law permits to them is not a matter of charity or largesse, but their rights as equal citizen of the country. So this powerful statement very clearly says that each and every children or each and every individual with disabilities have their equal rights in all the resources of the country, being the citizen of a country like India. So with regard to the backdrop, so inclusive education, basically, as you know, that it's a philosophy based on human rights and social justice movement, and it aims to offering quality education for all students with and without special needs and communities, eliminating all sort of or all forms of discrimination on the basis of any sort of thing that may be the reason of. And inclusive education has gained popularity and great attention, and has come to the forefront of educational debate in almost all the developed and developing countries around the world. And this is very evident throughout the scenario if you look into. And inclusive education has now gained the acceptance of global development agenda all over the world, and it has been considered as the most viable strategy to reduce exclusion in a society whose only ambition is to be inclusive, enabling, and democratic one. And human rights movements, international declarations, and conventions have made significant contribution in endorsing and promoting inclusive education worldwide, and in India is also not an exception in this regard. And India, being a democratic, socialist and republic country, is committed to provide quality education to all its citizens without making any sort of discrimination on any ground, or be it disability or race or caste or creed. And in this context, inclusive education is the most pragmatic and reasonable option before the government of India to ensure the fundamental rights to education for all children, and it includes all and excludes no one. So with regard to the rationale for this study, so due to various national policies, legislations, and international mandates, for example, Sarva Shiksha Vision, which came in 2001, and National Policy for Education for Persons with Disabilities, which came in 2006, then UNCRPD, IEDSS, Right to Education Act, and then RPWD Act, which came in 2016, and then the latest one, that is National Education Policy 2020. It has become mandatory for all the states and union territories of India to provide compulsory, free, and quality education to all children with special needs within the age range of 6 to 18 years of age, and at neighboring mainstream schools without any discrimination. And the notion of inclusion represent a revolutionary shift from existing rigid organizational structures and systems of service delivery in education to a pragmatic, enabling, and need-based, as well as rational and universal model of education for all. And among the various factors or accountable issues or subject which are really responsible for successful implementation of inclusive education, teacher-related variable like their knowledge and self-efficacy and attitude towards inclusive education and children with special needs are most significant and most effectively contributing one. And teachers' beliefs and attitudes towards inclusions are closely linked with the acceptance of children with special needs. And this particular fact has been very clearly reflected throughout many studies conducted by many scholars across the world and even in India. And and teachers' belief, attitude are also very crucial for successful for the success of inclusion. And several studies indicate that attitude of teachers toward children with special needs can be critical to the quality of their inclusive instructional strategies as well. And scholars also have argued, that general education teachers' knowledge and attitude toward children with special needs are among the most important factors influencing collaborative efforts between special and general educators for implementation of inclusive education. And it has also been found that negative attitude towards disability and inclusion lead to a low expectation of students, and this may result in reduced learning opportunities and performances. And studies have also confirmed that improving teachers' pedagogical knowledge is most effective way to promote and ensure effective inclusion and improve the achievement of students with disabilities. So thus, from the above discussion, it can be rightly concluded and made clear that the sound knowledge and positive attitude of teachers are very crucial and important for effective implementation of inclusive education and to ensure full participation and inclusion of children with special needs in the mainstream schooling system in India as well. And in this particular, keeping this backdrop and rationale in mind, this particular study has, I have undertaken to conduct. And the objectives of these particular studies are as follows. The first one is to explore the knowledge of mainstream primary school teachers about inclusive education for children with special needs. The second objective is to explore the knowledge of the mainstream high school teachers about inclusive education for children with special needs. And the third objective is to assess the attitude of teachers towards inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream primary schools. And the fourth objective is to assess the attitude of teachers towards inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream high schools. And the fifth one is to find out the differences between teachers working in mainstream primary and high schools with regard to their level of knowledge about inclusive education for children with special needs. And the last one is to find out the difference between teachers working in mainstream primary and secondary schools with regard to their level of attitude towards inclusion of children with special needs. And based on the objectives, and I have formed 4 to 5 measures, research question, and the questions are as follows. So the first one is to know like how knowledgeable mainstream primary school teachers are about inclusive education for children with special needs. And the second question is how knowledgeable the mainstream high school teachers are about inclusive education for children with special needs. And the third and fourth one is how is the attitude of teachers towards inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream primary school and secondary schools. And is there then another question is there any significant difference between the teachers working in mainstream primary schools and high schools with regard to their level of knowledge about inclusive education for children with special needs? And the last one is there any significant difference between the teachers working in mainstream primary and high schools? Meeting at it. So is there any significant difference between the last question is there any significant difference between the teachers working in mainstream primary and high schools with regard to their level of attitude towards inclusion of children with special needs? So with regard to the operational definition, so the key term, the knowledge in the present study, the knowledge refers to the skill, competency, training, ability, and understanding of teachers about inclusive education for children with special needs in mainstream schools. And the term attitude has been used in the study, and this particular term refers to the teacher's prevailing tendency to respond favorably and unfavorably to inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream primary and high schools. And another important term, that is inclusion. Inclusion means inclusion in education, which ensures that all students, regardless of the challenges or disabilities, learn together in regular neighborhood schools. And it provides high quality instruction, tailored support, and a respectful and supportive environment that fosters learning, participation, and success in all aspects of the school life. Another term that has been used in this study, that is mainstream school. So in this study, the term mainstream school refers to all the government-aided and funded regular primary and high schools in Kontai subdivision. Kontai is a subdivision under the district of Purbo Mednipur in the state of Bengal. And however, these schools are not specially designed and maintained and funded by government for children with special needs. So it is basically meant for all type of children, regardless of the disability. So that is the school which is called as mainstream schools. And in the present study, the term teachers refers to the full-time teachers, both male and female, who are working in the mainstream primary and high schools in Kontai subdivision under the Purbo Mednipur district. And children with special needs are the children with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory impairment, which in interaction with barriers hinders their full and effective participation in the society equally with others. And in the current study, the term children with special needs refers to all the 21 type of children with disabilities as defined under the RPWD Act 2016. Delimitation of this study. So the study aimed at assessing only the knowledge and attitude of teachers working in the mainstream primary and high schools towards inclusive education and inclusion of children with special needs. And in this study, the sample of teachers were selected from the mainstream primary and high schools of Kontai subdivision under Purbo Mednipur district and West Bengal city only. And the collected data of the study were delimited to the sample of 200 mainstream primary school teachers, and which constitute of 100 female and 100 female, and 200 mainstream high school teachers, which constitute of 100 male teachers and 100 female teachers only. And this study was delimited to the data collected through the survey during the period from August 9, 2019 to December 2020. And the investigation was carried out in the context of the selected research objective and questions only. So extensive review of literature was done, and the literature reviewed for these studies are related to barriers of inclusive education, attitudes of teachers, and teachers' awareness level about inclusive education and disability. Methodology. So in this particular study, a survey research design under descriptive research method was employed. Teachers from both mainstream primary and secondary schools are selected as sample for the present study, and sampling area. So the teachers are selected from both mainstream primary and secondary schools under the Kontai subdivision of Purbo Medinipur district, the state of West Bengal. So sample size, as I mentioned, the total sample size is 400, and from mainstream primary schools, I've selected 200 sample, and from the mainstream high school, the teachers are selected, both male and female. So simple random sampling and sampling technique. So simple random sampling technique under the probability sampling method was used for selection of the sample, as mentioned for this study. With regard to the research tools, so two close-ended questionnaires were used. So the first close-ended questionnaire is knowledge questionnaire, and this tool was used to assess the knowledge of mainstream primary and high school teachers about inclusive education for children with disabilities. And the second questionnaire is a questionnaire about attitude questionnaire, which was used to assess the attitudes of teachers towards inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream primary and high schools. With regard to the establishment of validity of the research tools, so the research tools were developed based on the findings of the literature, relevant models, and standardized tools and experts' inputs. And they were reviewed by 10 qualified experts having knowledge in disability studies, special education, inclusive education, research methodology, as well as statistical analysis. And the experts evaluated the items appropriateness of the rating scale and language clarity, suggesting modifications were needed. And only items with over 80% acceptance were included, ensuring content and face validity. And the reliability of the tool was also established through a pilot study, and I also used test and retest method here. So the statistical method employed for testing the reliability of the tools are as follows: the Cronbach alpha, Spearman Brown split up, and Gutman split up. So these are the statistical techniques which are used, and it was found that the tools are highly reliable. Then data collection procedure. So the researcher, with the help of two research assistants, so two research assistants were employed for collection of the data for this particular study. So initially, that permission was taken from the district inspector of the schools, and then approval was with the help of the DIS order. Permission was also taken from the headmaster and headmistress of the selected schools, followed by a briefing of the study's objective. In the third phase, teacher selection. So teachers are randomly selected with school heads permission and informed about the study. And the data collection. So the two close-ended questionnaire, as I mentioned, were used, and informed consent was obtained from all the participants. Research ethics. So the study adhered to the following ethical considerations. So permissions are obtained from the relevant authorities. Informed consent. Participants were briefed on the study's purpose, duration, and procedure. And participants list to the participants had the participation was voluntary. So there was no commitment. They'll have to take part until the study get end. And then confidentiality, privacy, with regard to the confidentiality, privacy, and data security were ensured. And the participation was not influenced by monetary benefits, and transparency was also maintained in this particular study. So data were analyzed fairly without fabrication or bias, and proper credit was given to all the resources and all the work cited and consulted to complete this particular study. So this is the consideration I followed. Data analysis. So the collected data were systematically tabulated and analyzed using both parametric and non-parametric tests, and I also took the help of the ASPSS. And the statistical tests used in this analysis include Kolmogorov-Smirnov test to check the normality of the data distribution before applying parametric test. And on-sample t-test was used to compare the mean scores of knowledge and attitudes against assumed means values, and independent sample t-test, and it was used to examine differences in knowledge and attitude between two independent groups of variables, such as male female teachers and urban and rural teachers. Then Manoic new test, this non-parametric test alternative to the independent t-test was used when the data did not meet normality assumptions. And one way ANOVA test, it was used to assess the differences in knowledge and attitude among teachers when the group was more than two. And Kruskal-Wallis test, this is a non-parametric test equivalent to the ANOVA, and in ANOVA, and it was used when normality assumptions were not met. So I'm not going to into all the tables. I'm just I'll be highlighting all the major findings that I've got from the study. So findings with regard to the knowledge of primary school teachers. So here I found that the computed mean score was significantly higher than the assumed mean scores, indicating a high level of knowledge among mainstream primary school teachers about inclusive education for children with special needs. And I also found it was also found that no significant differences are there in the mean scores of male and female teachers. And urban teachers had a mean rank score of 32.11, and rural teachers had 37.35, with a significance values of 0.275, and proving locality did not impact knowledge. And factors like age, teaching experiences, and exposure to children with special needs did not significantly affect knowledge level of teachers of mainstream primary schools. And with regard to the knowledge of high school teachers, so I found that the computed mean scores was significantly higher than the assumed mean scores, indicating very high level of knowledge about inclusive education among mainstream high school teachers. And it was also found that gender, age, teaching experiences, and locality did not significantly impact knowledge level of this group of teachers. And the teachers with classroom exposure to students with disabilities had significantly higher knowledge than those without exposure. So those who had experience to work with children with disabilities in their schools had good level of knowledge about inclusive education and teaching strategies for them. Then the findings with regard to the impact of training on knowledge. So teachers who received pre-service training in special education had significantly higher knowledge than those who received periodic and irregular in-service training. And no significant difference was found between teachers who had never received training and those who had only irregular and periodic in-service training. And it was also found that longer in-service training duration correlated with higher knowledge level. And findings with regard to the attitude of primary school teachers. So here the computed mean scores were significantly higher than the assumed mean scores, indicating a highly positive attitudes toward the inclusion of children with special needs in the mainstream primary schools. And it was also found that rural teachers had a significantly more positive attitudes compared to the urban teachers towards the inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream primary schools. Then it was also found that age, gender, experience, training, and exposure to children with special needs did not significantly influence attitude of this group of teachers. Then findings with regard to attitude of high school teachers. So here also the computed mean scores were significantly higher than the assumed mean scores, indicating highly positive attitudes about inclusion of children in the mainstream high schools among teachers. And it was also found that female teachers had a significantly more positive attitudes than male teachers towards inclusion of children with special needs in the mainstream high schools. And another important finding was that teachers with classroom exposure to children with disabilities had significantly more positive attitudes than those without exposure. And it is also found that pre-service and systemic in-service training positively influenced attitude. So those who receive pre-service training program about inclusive education and disability or special education, and those who are in service and getting regularly or getting training in a systematic manner about inclusive education or special education, have positive attitudes towards inclusion of children with special needs in the mainstream high schools. Comparison of primary and high school teachers. So high school teachers had significantly higher means rank score in knowledge than primary school teachers, and it was also found that no significant difference was there in the attitude levels between primary and high school teachers. And recommendation. So since teachers' knowledge is crucial for effective inclusion or inclusive education, so systematic efforts should be made to strengthen teachers' understanding about disabilities and inclusive practices. Another recommendation that I made based on the findings of the studies and literature, that is, pre-service and periodic in-service training should be mandatory for all teachers who are working in mainstream primary and secondary schools, to ensure they have the necessary skills and positive attitudes toward inclusive education. Then the education department should, there was also gap between the primary school attitude and mainstream school teachers' attitude and knowledge level. So the education department should take initiative to enhance primary school teachers' knowledge about inclusive education, since high school teachers had significantly higher knowledge about inclusion and inclusive education system. And another recommendation is, opportunities should be created for all teachers who interact with children with disabilities in mainstream school to enhance their understanding of disabilities and inclusive teaching methods, and then extending the duration of the in-service training. So most of the teachers who are getting in-service training is of short duration, and the nature of the training is also questionable. Like in that training program, very minimal sort of aspect of inclusive education and disability sort of things are kept. So longer training duration, the training program, the training that is given to the in-service teachers are to be improved, and it should have a longer duration, because the longer because the longer training duration correlates with better knowledge, and in-service training should be optimized and not too short, and that is why. And limitation of the study. So this study has several limitations as well, and I need to acknowledge it surely. So with regard to data collection methods, the study relied on the close-ended questionnaire at limiting qualitative insights. So open-ended and mixed method approaches might optimize deep understanding about the variable that I studied. And geographical limitations. So actually the study was conducted in Kontai subdivision, which is which is the highly literate place in the district of Puro Mednipur, and the district of Puro Mednipur is the district with highest literacy rate in the state of Bengal. So the findings may not be generalizable to other regions of the states. So that is what is a geographical limitation of the study. And third is lack of cross verification. So the responses were not cross-checked due to privacy concerns and data collection limitation. And self-report bias. So the participants' responses might be influenced by personal biases, as the study relied on the self-reported data. So based on the limitation, delimitation, and findings, the limitation and delimitation of the study, I made some suggestion for future resources, like as follows. So expanding the scope. So a larger study across state of West Bengal can assess regional variations in teachers' knowledge and attitude. So this sort of study can be undertaken in future. And qualitative analysis. So in this particular study, I have not given much focus on the qualitative aspect. So other sort of methods or technique, like in-depth interviews, observations, and focus group discussion can provide more and comprehensive understanding about the knowledge and attitude of teachers towards inclusive education and towards inclusion of students with disabilities in the mainstream schooling system in the state of Bengal. So further studies can be undertaken, and there this sort of technique and methods can be employed to come up with more insightful findings. And another aspect is assessing other stakeholders. So in this particular study, I have only assessed the attitude of teachers and teachers. And although the teachers is one of the most important factor for promoting inclusive education and including the children, or for including children with disabilities in the mainstream schooling system, but there are numbers of stakeholders, for example, administrators like SIDI and ASI, ADI, and then policymakers and school management committees, parents. They are also very important stakeholder for promoting inclusive education in a very comprehensive, meaningful, and systematic manner. So their knowledge and attitude is also important. So further studies can be undertaken to assess their attitude and understanding and knowledge about inclusive education, and as well as their attitude toward inclusion of children with disabilities in the mainstream, primary and high school in the state of Bengal. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that the study provides valuable insights into the knowledge and attitude of mainstream school teachers toward inclusive education for children with special needs. And while teachers demonstrated generally high level of knowledge and positive attitudes, systematic training and classroom exposure played a significant role in enhancing these aspects. And despite strong policies and implementation challenges persist, there are numbers of policies, but still implementation challenges persist in ensuring meaningful inclusive education in the state of Bengal. So the findings of the studies may serve as an important resource for the policymaker, educators, and stakeholders to improve teachers training, promote inclusion, and safeguard the educational rights of persons with disabilities in the mainstream schools. So these are the studies that I have consulted so far to prepare this presentation. And I also need to acknowledge that I must express my sincere gratitude to the Ministry of Education, Government of India, for funding this project under the Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching scheme. And I extend my heartfelt appreciation and thanks to all the individuals and institutions who have contributed to the successful completion of this study, and special thanks to my mentor, colleagues, and participants for the resource assistants for their valuable insights and unwavering support throughout this resourceful journey. And their encouragement and collaboration have been instrumental in shaping this work. And I also thank all of you for patiently listening, and I'll be happy enough to go for discussion on whatever I have said and whatever I have presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar, for a most interesting and well-organized presentation. It was good to see a decent study. Although many people are interested in inclusion in India, we see too few studies of this kind of detail being conducted. So it was really good to see such a thorough study, great detail given to the ethical issues around this issue, and also a detailed discussion of the way that data was managed and analyzed as well. So congratulations. I'm going to open up for questions in just a minute, but perhaps I could start off by asking two, one which I think you'll be able to answer very quickly, and another one perhaps a little more complex. How do you plan to disseminate this this work now that you've completed the study? Do you have plans for publication at the moment?
On the basis of no, I have not published any paper so far, but I have submitted a paper out of the findings, and yeah, I have submitted a report to the Ministry of Education, and I also have submitted the report to the NCRT and NCT as well, with the consent of Pondicherry University, because Pondicherry University was the leading agency for this particular scheme on behalf of Ministry of Education. Yeah.
Yeah, good. I think that's important because unfortunately we see too many pieces of research conducted and they never get to the reporting stage, and we don't get to disseminate and share information, which is of course the way that we're all going to learn from these kind of studies. Then one other question before I bring other people in, if I may. Obviously disability is a very wide area covering intellectual disabilities, sensory disabilities, learning problems. Are you able to disaggregate your data very much so that you can compare kind of attitudes and expectations across the different categories of special educational need and disability?
No, in my study, I have not looked into that aspect actually. So here, as per the RPWD Act, all the schools in Bengal are supposed to include all the 21 type of students with disabilities without any discrimination. So the general attitude I have studied of the teachers. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think further studies can be undertaken to look into this sort of thing, like about which type of disability the teachers hold, what type of attitude. So that
yeah,
can be further scope for the study. Yeah.
yeah. I wasn't implying any criticism of your work or anything here, but we do know from other studies conducted elsewhere in the world, for instance, that there is quite a difference of attitude towards, for instance, children with emotional and behavioral difficulties to those with maybe dyslexia or those with a physical disability. So I think it would be an interesting thing to follow up with your research. Rajesh, are we able to bring people in, or are they just going to have to type their questions? Which is going to be easiest?
They can type the questions, sir, as well as they can raise their hand. In case if they're raising, I'll just note them.
Okay, so I see that Golomina has a raised hand. Would you like to come in and ask your question, please? Hello, Golomina? Yeah, thank you.
I think Galumina has raised hand.
Yeah,
Can they unmute
your
themselves?
your microphone is unmuted from my end. You can ask the question.
He's in mute mode, I think.
Yeah, I have unmuted him, so he can
Okay.
unmute from his side now.
Okay, we'll pass that back to him if he can't come in at the moment then. So Rupajyoti Mitra, please, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, sir, I asked a question. Inclusive education. That inclusive education is possible in our government school or without infrastructure?
So actually,
Because
yeah. So I
yes,
think I'm not the right person to make a comment on that, but that is the thing I studied. Like, what is their attitude? Suppose if the policy is saying that every children with disability should be integrated or included in the mainstream schooling system. So we know and that there are several studies which reflect that we have a problem in the schooling system, like we have lack of infrastructure, lack of trained and competent teachers. So all these things developed the backdrop of my study, and keeping that in mind, I wanted to study the attitude. So what the teachers feel, you know although the policies are saying that the education system has to be inclusive enough without any sort of compromise, but we also need to understand like what the teacher feel, right? So that is what that is what I studied, and what I found that they're positive. They have a positive attitudes towards inclusive education, and they have a positive attitudes towards inclusion of children with disabilities even in the mainstream primary and secondary schools. So that is what I found. Yeah, of course there are a lot of barriers and challenges that are to be addressed very systematically, and it's a time consuming process.
Yes, I think questions of resourcing and infrastructure are obviously very important, but as Dr. Sarkar has said, we have to have positive attitudes before we can move this whole issue forward. But I think studies of the necessary resources to be successful in inclusion are going to be very important in the near future, and maybe that's something that people here would like to take up in their own research. So thank you for your question. Have we got Golomina yet? Question. See, we still have a hand raised, but okay. In that case, Ravati, would you like to come in, please? Ravati, are you there, please? You've got your hand raised. No, Ravati's disappeared. We must have other questions there from from people, I'm sure. Don't be afraid to ask.
Hello, good evening.
Ravati's back. Okay. Ravati,
Yeah.
and then Professor
Thank you.
Narayan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
So,
Ravati.
uh, thanks for the presentation to the team members and the organizers. Actually, I was about to ask, I had some questions in my mind, like teachers were the experience of the teachers. Like we have in inclusive education, we have children with disabilities. You have taken the teacher's attitude and knowledge, sir. So my question is that teachers have knowledge about, it shows like they have some knowledge at higher secondary primary school teachers, they have knowledge, but still they need some training, and that you have the result finding shows that. So I have a question, like we need the knowledge, so the knowledge of children with disabilities, because we have now, as per RPWD Act, we have 21 category of disabilities. So from there are different group of children in the inclusive education program. The experience of teachers will also vary working with these children with disabilities. So is that any such criteria have been taken to analyze like teachers like knowledge in that perspective, along with like category of children, or with relevant to the experience? So just I thought to know this aspect. Can you just explain on this aspect,
Yeah,
like what
thank you.
was the relevance have been made on this criteria? Maybe you have
So
taken some inclusion criteria.
yeah, so ma'am, to respond to your question, actually, I have explored the knowledge of teachers about inclusive education. So what inclusive education is and how inclusive education is implemented, what are the strategies and principles and all these things, what are the parameters, so some of the parameters. So I explored the knowledge of teachers about inclusive education in mainstream secondary schools. Basically, the schools are not meant for children with disabilities, so it's a mainstream school. But if any children with disability wants to come and get admission in the schools, the school authority cannot say no. So that is one aspect. And the knowledge of about inclusion, the parameters, the indicators that I have included in the questionnaire are based on some standard tools and based on the reflection from the literature. So I have reviewed extensive literature, and from that I formed the indicators. So that is what I explored. And another aspect that you wanted to know, like, yeah, there are 21 type of disabilities as per the RPWD Act, and all students do have the right to get admission in the mainstream schooling system. But in my study, I have not categorically looked into like whether the teacher, what is the teacher's attitude about different type of children with disabilities. So that may be a kind of a delimitation of my study, and further studies can be explored to understand, like, what do the teachers feel about what do the teacher feel about inclusion of different type of students with disabilities in the mainstream schooling system. So that can be another space, that can be another sort of thing which can be undertaken in further studies. That is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But as far as we believe, like teachers should also need in the knowledge way, the teachers should need awareness, nature, characteristics of all disability students. Then only they can
True.
work.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
that is what we have. The few parameters were that I can share the tool that I have used in my studies with
Okay.
you after this program. Even
Yeah.
you can go through and you can even I can share the inter project, because it has already been submitted to the government Minister of Education. So no problem at all. So you can go through it and you can look into like what are the parameters that I have used to assess the knowledge level of these teachers.
Okay.
But
That's
categorically,
good.
I have not seen. Yeah, categorically, I have not seen their attitude. I have not explored their attitude.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Revati. Professor Narayan has been waiting patiently to ask a question. So, Jansi, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ratan. It was a good presentation. And before I respond, make my points, Revati, I would like to tell you, in addition to what Ratan Sarkar ji has told, not all 21 disabilities require special education. We must keep this in mind. Don't look at the number 21. There are Parkinson's, for instance. Parkinson's is listed in our 21 disability, but you are not going to have a person with Parkinson's in your classroom right away, you see. And then also there are some disabilities that require teacher sensitivity, not essentially special educational methods. For instance, if you take blood disorders, there are 3 blood disorders listed in our act. The teacher needs to be sensitive to the child's needs. The child will get fatigue in the classroom. He'll have to go for frequent blood transfusion. The teacher has to be aware and sensitive, and the lessons that he would miss, the teacher may want to supplement it in some manner. And it is not special education, it is having a concern for the child, and it is child specific, and parents will be in picture. So don't look at 21 and get overwhelmed. You know, we teachers have to work with children who come to us, because the child has the right to education, and we are expected to provide the education that is appropriate for that child. As you rightly pointed, teacher needs to be aware. Teacher needs to have the knowledge about each of the children in her classroom. Rather than looking at 21 disabilities, this many of what will I do, you think of you in your class and the children in your classroom. You will know how to work. Even a child with visual impairment, no 2 children are alike. A child with intellectual disability, no 2 children are alike. So it is very child specific. When you have the children in your classroom, you will know what is the specific need of this given child that I need to attend. And it becomes simpler and easier rather than looking at 21. Are you getting my point, Revati?
Yes, ma'am, I agree with
that
you.
becomes much easier for you. Don't get
Actually,
overwhelmed. Please don't get overwhelmed
yes.
with this.
Actually,
This is
my
very
point
important.
is to ask like the children with sensory and intellectual disabilities and physical, like motor and sensory and intellectual disabilities, that is commonly we used to find children in the inclusive education classroom.
Yeah,
It was
that
like I
common.
slightly elaborated it. Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Anyway,
Yeah,
the
ma'am.
information that you gave, it was very useful, ma'am, gave me a
I'd
good
like to add.
understanding.
We teachers have to face. That is how I look at it.
Yes.
And I look at it as
Yes,
a
ma'am.
child in my classroom, what are his or her needs? So one by one, I'll have more and more children as my experience increases. And so the number of children with the diverse learning needs would have gradually increased, and I would have become more and more competent. That's how I look at it. Qualification alone doesn't help. Laws and legal provisions, legislation, they alone don't help. It is I and my attitude that matters, in addition to the knowledge component that I possess. This is very important.
Sensibility matters a lot. Thank you, ma'am, for that good explanation.
May I have a question for Ratan?
Please.
You said that you had the closed-ended questionnaire, right? And towards the end, you yourself called it as a limitation. So why did you not think of it that this limitation is there? I will not have this limitation. I'll do something about it. You could have many limitations in the end that you listed. Some of them, okay, limited area you worked with and all is fine. But this perhaps, if you had thought of, did you have open-ended questions at the end of the closed-ended questions, 2 or 3?
So yeah, ma'am, I had, and that also for the purpose of analysis, I have.
Did you analyze the open-ended questions, what the teacher said? And those open-ended questions, under the attitude scale and also the attitude questionnaire and the knowledge questionnaire, each one having 2 to 3 open-ended questions, which you think the teacher or your participant does not have an opportunity to express because the whole thing is tight and closed-ended. So she or he may have an opportunity to write in these 3 or 4. And those 3 or 4 questions of all the participants analyzed with the qualitative research method, keeping in mind what they have written, and then find the keywords that they have used, and then get all your codes, and then you would have yourself delimited or undone with that limitation in your study, rather than simply having a tightly packed closed-ended questionnaire. And another question I want to ask is, what kind of closed-ended questionnaire it was? Agree, somewhat agree, disagree, something like that, or yes, no, or what kind of response columns you had for the statements that you had?
So, ma'am, it was for the awareness, for the attitude, it was rating scale sort of thing. Agree, disagree.
Likert scale? How many points Likert scale?
5 points, 5 point rating Likert scale.
Okay.
5 point Likert scale. And for the knowledge, actually, it has domain, and under that domain, depending on the type of question, I made various options. For example, training. What kind of training they have received? So, frequently, periodically, systematically, very less.
Comparative terms.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So like that. And for example, with regard to their academic qualification, with regard to their exposure to the children with disabilities in the class, some may have exposure, some may do not have exposure, or some may have never come across the children with disabilities in the teaching period. So like that, 4 or 5 categories are there depending on the nature of the questions. And I conducted a pilot study, interviewed them, discussed with them, and depending on the responses, the majority of the responses, that categorization was made, so that I can come up with some organized set of data and I can easily analyze it. That was the thing. Yeah.
When you look at knowledge and attitude, knowledge is definite. It doesn't change. You and I have the same knowledge and we agree on that. Attitude is you and I may differ in our opinion on that given piece of information. So the response columns should suitably be made in such a manner. Knowledge has a right and a wrong.
Yeah.
When you tend to say that the facts, they are basically, knowledge is facts and attitude is opinion. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what kind of answering options they have had you explained, but knowledge will ask for what? Knowledge about disabilities in your questionnaire? What do they know about disability, or what was the knowledge you were digging into to find out from them?
Just a second, ma'am, if I can show you.
No. It's getting late. Just verbally you tell me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with regard to the knowledge, ma'am, you're asking?
What kind of questions were in knowledge? About disability? Was it about disability or about inclusion or about educational system? What did it
just, ma'am, I'll take just a minute. It is there. Can I show it to you, ma'am?
No. It's the 8 o'clock, nearing 8 o'clock. So you verbally tell you have conducted this study.
So yeah, it is about that training that they have received, about their understanding about inclusive education, about disability. Then it is also about how to use teaching learning material to promote inclusive education. Then how to conduct assessment. Then why inclusive education is important.
So that becomes an opinion question. That's not a knowledge question.
No, whether they know it or not. So this sort of thing, like whether they know it or not. So knowledge is knowledge. Understanding about something is the knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good study. You have really taken efforts and you have made a lot of recommendation. I don't know to whom you have made the recommendation, which government department or what. I also have a suggestion for you. You've done a very good study. The suggestion is there any recommendation for us, the professionals, to kind of promote inclusive education? So what would you teach your student teachers now so that inclusion becomes a possibility? What kind of in-service trainings that you would give today to the existing teachers, so that inclusion becomes a possibility with positive attitude in people. So some recommendation for us, the stakeholders, not just the government system. Government system has, and you have given a lot of recommendations. Or a researcher in our group, see, there are still how many people? 49 people are still there. What kind of research you would like them to take up in this area of concern?
So with regard to this in-service teacher training program, a study can be taken like the government in the state of Bengal is conducting in-service training program for all the mainstream school teachers. But if we look into the content of the training program, then we will see that disability-oriented content or inclusive education-oriented content or the pedagogy-related content which are required for
who will give? You should be able to. This is the point I'm making. Government will do what it does. What will we do? My question is that. What will we, the educators, we, the professionals in the field, do to facilitate inclusive education? That kind of recommendation, if you come up with, I think many researchers in our group may take up that topic as a topic to work on. This is what your presentation is good. You have made a beautiful beginning. And you yourself may want to go further to see action points. Okay, ye karna padega. Abhi main kya karu? You know, that kind of this need to be done. What is my and your own students, you can encourage them to take up topics. This is just my suggestion, up to you to take it. Thank you, Richard, for the opportunity.
Okay, we have 4 raised hands at the moment, so I'm conscious of people's time here. So if I can just give each one of these questioners 3 or 4 minutes to ask their question and see if we can get an answer.
We also have 2 questions that has been put in the chat box.
Okay, chat box. I'll hand over to Rajesh for the chat box in a while. So, Mercy Speaker.
Yep. Jayanti ma'am, this is am I audible?
Yes, perfectly audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank
Yes, you are.
Yeah, Jayanti ma'am, this is more of, I'm seeking your opinion. This is in line with Revati ma'am's questions. What about sensory profiling? That also helps, because regardless of children being on the spectrum or not these days, sensory profiling also helps with inclusive education, part of it.
Yes.
What do you say, ma'am?
Absolutely, absolutely. That needs to be part of the research that we do. Sensory profiling must be given the focus and importance for appropriate programming for the child. Yes, I agree.
Thank you, ma'am.
I totally agree.
VS Meena, is there somewhere? VS Meena, would you like to come in?
Sir, if you allow me to speak, I would like to speak.
Okay, this is Krishna Kalita, is that right? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, do please.
So, yeah. So, as like Zayanti ma'am was asking about inclusive education, I just want to add one point. Is it possible if we train the peer group of the particular school so that it will facilitate like inclusive school environment along with the teachers? So I hope that empathy and that that acceptance from the peer group, if it is possible to train, and if we can give certain training to them, or maybe to make them understand the needs and different kind of challenges facing by the their peer group, so it may help. I don't know, it's my personal experience. Since when I studied, it was not an inclusive school, but yeah, it was a school which support the person with disability. I had a friend who had mental retardation at that time, but I was not aware of. But our teachers used to say us you have to help him because he has some limitation, he cannot write, he cannot read. So whenever it comes to our classroom or something, then that the teacher used to ask us to help him in the classroom as well. So I feel like it may can help for the inclusive classroom environment. I may be wrong, but yeah, it was my experience during my school time. I would like to know about Zayanti ma'am insight on these things. because I'm very much curious what kind of suggestion you can give, ma'am. Thank you.
So peer group is absolutely essential. There is no two ways about it. Peer preparation is important. But today is Ratan's day, not mine. So he will be the one to be responding to this. But 110%, we all agree that peer preparation is important. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
Ratan will supplement. Yeah, he will be able to tell you.
Yeah, I'd like to know from sir also, if it is possible. Yeah. Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
Dr. Sarkar, any observations to make?
Yeah, peer group is, although it doesn't come under this scope of my study, but yeah, I have studied few literature and have done some sort of qualitative study also in my area in the district of Purba Medinipur and in the district of South Bengal. And I feel and I found that peer group is important for promotion of inclusion. Yeah, it is important.
Okay.
And
sorry.
I think there are one question. There is one or two questions raised by Dr. Anamika Sinha, ma'am. My response.
Krishnama, you've had your hand raised. Are you there? No. Okay. Sita Subramaniam, are you there, please?
Good evening, ma'am. I represent the Indian Public School. We do have an inclusive education. It's an IB school, and it's in a place called Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. We have, a department with special educators, and the program is going very smoothly, I would say. And we do the inclusion part. We give equal opportunities for the children with challenges. But I'm happy that I was able to be a part of this webinar today. And I hope that Jayanti ma'am will give us more inputs on this, how to have teacher training and also organize some teacher training classes during the vacations. That's my request.
Okay, thank you very much. Rajesh, can I hand over to you for people who have...
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think there are a lot of questions still. So let me take the first question, which is there in the chat box. First of all, very big congratulations to Dr. Aparna Mukherjee. She is now the assistant professor in School of Education at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. So congratulations. And the question that you have asked is, she says she would like to know if there are any significant differences in the attitudes of teachers who had undergone any training in inclusive education with those who did not have any kind of training.
Yeah, so I found two things. Actually, there are teachers in the government schools with special B.Ed and D.Ed background. So those who have qualifications, certified qualification in the area of disability and special education have shown positive attitudes and higher level of knowledge about inclusive education. And another aspect is that the teachers who have got training or in-service training on inclusive education or allied pedagogies for longer duration have also showed significantly higher or positive attitude towards inclusive education or inclusion of children with special needs in the mainstream primary and high schools. That was also the findings. Yeah.
Yes. To Dr. Anamika Sinha, madam, I would like to know what type of schools you have taken for the study, whether it was government school or private school or included both. Is there any difference in their attitude?
So yeah, actually, with regard to the first question, I have selected only government aided and government funded school in Bengal as per the administration of government of Bengal. There are private school as well, but it is only recognized, but it is not funded or it is aided. So I have selected only government school that is funded or aided. And since I have selected only one type of school, that is government aided or government funded school, I have not made any comparison between that attitude level of teachers or knowledge level of teachers from government as well as private sector, private schools. I have not made any comparison. But I have made a comparison. with regard to the knowledge of or with regard to the attitude levels of teachers working in the government primary schools and government high schools. And I found that the teachers of government high schools do have more positive attitudes rather than the teachers working in the government primary schools. And another significant finding is also that the teachers from rural area have showed more positive attitudes towards inclusive education or towards inclusion of children with special needs in the mainstream primary schools and mainstream high schools than the teachers in urban areas. That means in cities.
Yes, I think we'll take one last question before we call off the session. Kushnuma asks about how to prepare parents for inclusive education.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me opportunity to ask my problems. Sir, I have a question about inclusive education. How to prepare parents for inclusive education? Because, sir, we all know about inclusive education, but it will be difficult to parents about inclusive education. And sir, how to assure parents that their children are safe with special need students, sir, in rural areas?
So it's very generic. I do not know like how it is related to the study that I presented, but yeah, I think we have a good number of scholars, very good scholars, madam and sir, and other people are there. They can respond to your question from their understanding.
Yeah, Dr. Sarkar, this is clearly beyond the remit of your excellent study. It is a very legitimate question to ask, actually. I think sometimes parents do not get the information that they really need to understand what inclusion is about. And certainly in many parts of the world now, training for parents in the field of inclusive education is very much increasing, so they gain that understanding. And you're quite right, some of the questions that are asked are often about the safety of children. You know, if there are children with behavior difficulties accepted into this school, are they going to place my children at risk? Some questions are around if the teacher is spending too much time with children who have learning difficulties, will it slow down the learning of others? Very closely related to teacher education, of course, the training of teachers to be able to manage classrooms effectively so that those problems don't arise. But certainly I think there is an increasing need for parents both to be heard and also to be provided with appropriate training to support them to understand what inclusion actually is. I don't know if there's any other parents here who would like to add any comment to that. Perhaps that, Rajesh, maybe that would be a good topic for another one of these sessions, I think, to perhaps get a parent advocate to talk about this as an issue. We can ask around, see if we can find somebody. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I think we've had a really good session today. Once again, I need to say thank you to Dr. Sarkar for an excellent presentation. It's been very good to hear from him, and I hope we can stay in touch and maybe discuss some future work together. And I'd also like to thank everybody who's attended for some very good questions, for listening very patiently, and for some very thoughtful comments that we've had as well. These are, as you know, monthly sessions, and I know Rajesh has been working quite hard on the production of a newsletter, actually, which hopefully can be sent out soon, because then that will keep people informed of activities around the IIRN, and also with a program of forthcoming events. So we look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you very much for your attendance, and have a good weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, Sarkar, again. Continue with the study. This is a beginning, so